So I'm Gabe Zichermann, and I'm the author of 2 books on gamification and the CEO of Gamification.co and Dopamine.
Hi, I'm Tyler Crowley, CEO of Squeal and executive producer of the Launch Conference and co-host of This Week in Startups. Is it the best way? It's kind of really the only way initially. You know, initially you have your friends and family, and then maybe you get that or maybe you don't. And the friends and family stage, the idea of the company is still very, very new, right? Maybe it won't work. And then when the angel investors come, it's because the idea looks like it might work, right? You have a little bit of traction on the idea, and that's where the angel investors come in, and you try and find if this is going to work. And then if it does work, that's when you get to your venture capitals. But the angel investors also are one of the important parts of creating a startup ecosystem in a city. So angel investors usually only like to invest in startups that are near them, in their city, because they want to meet with them regularly to see how it's going. So angel investors are a necessary ingredient in each city to create a startup community. First you need startups, then you need angels. Once you have both of those, then you need mentors and VCs and investors and several other things. But you have to have angel investors to get your community started. So they play a very important role.
Well, I mean, there's a few things, right? But the first and most important thing is like how connected you are to the startup. It's very unusual for an angel investor to put money into a company that they're completely disconnected from, that they've never heard of, that they've never seen before, and that someone in their trusted network is not connected to. So even in angel groups where like, you know, groups of 40 or 50 people get together and they like invest in a startup together, or, you know, some of them, there's always someone internally who takes the lead on making that happen. So one of the angels will say, oh, I'm going to be the person who leads. That's the term used to describe it. I'm going to lead this deal, and I'm going to do all the due diligence. I'm going to find out about these startups. So first and foremost, it's connectivity. This idea that you can walk into a room of investors as a person they've never heard of before, and they don't know at all, an idea that they're like completely unfamiliar with, and raise money is almost like, it's not that it doesn't happen, but it's really unusual. And it's almost like the rock star version of an idea that you know happens often, and it's only at platforms like Launch or TechCrunch Disrupt or something like that where you sometimes have that opportunity, but you're backed by a very big kind of machine. So the first and most important thing is connectivity to the startups, and then the second thing, different from VCs, I would say, a lot of angels, most of the angels that I know really want to feel passionately about the idea. So often venture capitalists don't care that much about ideas. They care about markets and teams. And the ideas are really secondary or tertiary to them. But angels really generally care about the idea. And they really usually want to be like, oh, that's a product I would use, which is a very big kind of, which is a really, really kind of big distinction between a venture capitalist and an angel. In fact, I would never say that angel investors are always looking for anything. In fact, as a general rule, because very few angel investors do that as their living. So the majority of angel investors invest on the side of whatever else it is that they do, whether that's run startups, run a financial fund, whatever it is that they do as their main job. Very, very few people do angel investing as a full-time vocation. And so for those people, yes, it's important to constantly be in the stream of the know. But most angel investors, it's opportunistic. They find out about your startup when you connect with them the first time.
It's a great question. So generally you have the idea, you have the team, and then the market, right? That's really it. And you can have a great idea, but if there's no market for it, you shouldn't do it, really. And this happens a lot. And sometimes it's timing as well. Maybe the fourth thing is the timing, because some ideas didn't work in the past before Facebook, but now that Facebook exists, now this idea can work, right? Many people tried online video before YouTube, and until Flash started, Adobe created Flash, and now it was time to, the technology was available to try this idea. So between ideas, timing, market, and people, I think the smartest angel investors focus on the people, because angel investing is at the very early stages, right? When the idea is very new. Generally, the idea is going to change. In 95, maybe even 99% of cases, the end product is different than the original vision. So this is why it's important to invest in the person and not the idea. Is to connect with the audience. So whoever is listening, you want to connect with them. It's just like meeting a girl, or when boys and girls meet, right? There's magic, there's chemistry. You need chemistry. And chemistry is usually an emotional thing, not a conceptual thing. Same with meeting a girl, right? You don't think, it's more from the heart, not from the mind, generally. Yeah, so Tesna asks, could you give us a good speech example to get the investor's attention? So a good strategy for getting investors' attention is to use a story format. And well, the one thing that always gets investors' attention is when you talk about, prove why this idea is working. You've done market research on this idea, and here is the feedback from your focus group, or like the audience for your startup. So if you're doing a startup for retailers, you're going to create some new technology to make, retailers very happy. You want to be able to prove and show that retailers are very happy with this product, right? That's the first thing you could really do. And then create a story of how you're going to do this for all startups, and really communicate your vision in a very clear way that that you feel passionate about this, because the investor wants to see that you really love this idea, that you really are passionate about doing this, and it's not just something you want to try. I think that's what connects with them. But it's different for everybody. So.
I agree with everything that Tyler said. The other thing that is we both of us are involved in this accelerator called the Founder Institute, of which here in Colombia there's 2 branches, one in Bogota and one in Medellin, and we're actually here doing mentorship for the founders in Founder Institute, which is fi.co. And so one of the core disciplines in Founder Institute is to be able to describe your company in kind of very simple terms in less than a minute or so, and really be able to give somebody an exciting kind of snippet of what it is that you're trying to do and get their attention quickly. You really have very little time with people, no matter who they are, before they lose focus and lose attention on what you're saying, right? Like everyone watching right now is already bored because my preamble was way too long for this answer. So one of the main things that you can do, and one of the disciplines you can learn at Founder Institute is, how to give your company's pitch in a minute and be able to convey the core concepts, get people interested and want to take a follow-up meeting with you. So I would definitely practice 1 minute, 3 minute, 7 minute pitches as a discipline if you're interested in learning how to give good talks. Well, for my part, Tyler has a lot to say on this subject, but for my part, most of the time I think people are really, really bad at conveying their idea in a clear way. They've got so many things rattling around in their head. They've been thinking about this forever. They're, sitting at home late at night. I want to do this thing, and then they get up and they just go, blah, blah, my company does, blah, 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 blah. And you're just like, and I've been listening to you for 3 minutes, and I still don't know what you are trying to do. And if you can't convey that idea in that period of time, if you can't do it in a way that's idiot-proof and completely clear and absolutely unequivocally obvious, then you literally haven't done your job. And everything else around that speech, every other factor of the speech is secondary to actually getting the core message of what your idea is across to people. So I always tell people that that's the first thing they need to polish, and it's the core kind of FI presentation discipline.
Yeah. People make a lot of mistakes early on, and a lot of it is because they are so close to the product. And then I'm just repeating what Gabe said in another way, which is people in startups get very, very close to the product, too close, that they forget how normal people look at the problem. And so they need to step back and look at it new from the perspective of somebody who doesn't, is seeing it for the first time. And that's hard to do when you are living this idea every hour of every day. So it's removing yourself from the problem and seeing it again with new eyes. And when you do this, It's also to make it more emotional. Like how do you communicate the emotion behind this problem? And a lot of startups they forget about the emotion and they just focus on the facts and the numbers and the figures, and those are generally not very moving. Um, so that I think that's kind of a common mistake. They get too focused on the little details. You yeah. You say something crazy. Say something very dramatic, right? Um, say something like, I want to help teachers, or you know, every day 10,000 teachers are fired that are qualified. I I want to solve this problem. And that's just a big statement, right? Just say something that gets the person's attention initially. You have to just grab them emotionally first, and then you can build, you know. Um, I think you make a statement that shows what it is you really want to do in a very clear way. As you said, the clarity is very important. This is the biggest issue, most of all. People need to understand that they need to speak in a very simple, clear way about what they're doing. And it takes practice, actually. That's right. Generally, somebody will give you 15 seconds. And if you don't get them in the first 15 seconds, it's too late. So you have to communicate, oh, so what do you do? Oh, I do this, and but you don't want to talk about the details. You want to talk about the big emotional picture, because that's what they grab. They want to imagine something visual. They don't want to hear numbers initially. Once you grab them, then you can go into the details and go into the numbers. Okay, so this one's from Meheito. Meheito. There are some important aspects when the offers become by the development of technologies of the information and communications.
In the meantime, though.
What the idea is about IT or something that is very important aspect to have in mind, special content for.
Well, the vast majority of pitches that we do, we don't really deal with non-technology companies. So I never deal with companies that do things like start coffee shops and stuff. So that's not my area of interest or expertise. If you're interested in doing something that's not tech related, you can watch an American TV show called Shark Tank, which might be available. It's also the British one was called Dragon's Den, and that shows all about pitching your non-tech idea, how to pitch your pizza parlor, how to pitch your coffee shop, and that's that. Everything that we're talking about is about technology companies, and I couldn't tell you what you need to do to raise money to start something non-tech. Yeah, I couldn't tell you. What I can tell you is if your product is an enterprise product or it's a B2B product, your pitch does not need to be different, but you do need to make sure that you're pitching investors who care about the area or industry that you're trying to pitch. One of the biggest mistakes that startups make is they go to the wrong kind of investor. So if you are pitching a company that does enterprise software, you don't go to somebody who only does consumer internet. If you're doing something that's about travel and transportation, you don't go to somebody who really prefers healthcare. You've got to use resources to figure that out. So one resource that you can use for American investors is called thefunded.com. I don't think it covers Colombia, but it's a resource to figure out which investors do what, and what size of deal and what industry categories they're most interested in. Well, it's important to know who you're pitching for investments because you don't want to hear investors say no to you. So if you go like no's are bad because they add up. It's almost like investors meet each other and keep score. So if you go to the wrong investor, you're guaranteed to get a no. If you are pitching, new quantum physics nuclear reactor, and you go to a guy who does .com like internet startups with content, you are going to get a no. And that person's going to say, when they're asked about you by somebody else, they're going to say, "Oh, I saw that startup and I said no." And then the other person, it's called, you know what I mean? The other person is going to say like, "Oh, well, then why did that person say no? What's wrong with the startup?" And so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's the thing is investors talk to each other, and they rely on each other, and they have a sheep mentality or a bird mentality where they follow each other. If one person's in and he's a good investor, the other investors are likely to follow. So the first yes is very important, and the first few no's can be very dangerous. So one tactic or strategy is don't ask for money. Ask for advice. Say, I would love to take you for coffee and get your advice. And if the saying is, If you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. Because when you ask for money, you're going to get a lot of advice, and a lot of good advice, actually. It's a great way to learn a lot about the problem you want to solve, is to go around and talk to investors, and they'll give you wonderful ideas and a lot of history about people who tried this idea before and everything else. But if you want to get money, it's usually better to ask for the advice, and they'll because it's not so in your face. It's just, here's my idea, here's what I think. And generally they connect on a more emotional basis when they are in the advice mode. And they think, you know what, I really like this idea. Are you raising money? Oh, yes, I am. I am raising money. Why don't you give me some money? So, yeah. I think domain expertise is the most, I think, on a statistical basis. Google has really done this. Google now is doing a lot of investing, and they're taking a very scientific approach to their investing, like mathematical. And one of the interesting things is people who did a travel startup before, if they decide to do another travel startup again, usually statistically it's more successful than someone who's approaching it for the first time because they have domain expertise. And a lot of times startup people don't want to repeat a startup. They want to try something new. They're bored of it. Entrepreneurs generally have ADD. They want to try something new every time. That's why we're entrepreneurs, right? So, but when those times when they do want to do it again, statistically it can be very attractive, and I think good investors are aware of this. And those are well, that's why when somebody has done something successful once, if they're willing to do it again, but it'll be boring to do it again. But they're obsessed and they want to improve it again. Like Steve Jobs was like this. He just constantly wanted to improve this, one kind. I think those are amazing entrepreneurs if they can maintain that focus.
Well, choosing the right idea also is complicated, and a lot of startup founders have trouble with it. Sorry, did you need something? Oh. A lot of startup founders have trouble with that, and that's another thing that we do in Founder Institute at length is help people kind of pick the right idea, refine the right idea. It's perfectly normal to have more than one idea, but you do need to settle on one before you can realistically start your company. Yeah, so Tesna's question, is a business plan really necessary? No. That's a quick answer. Nobody needs a business plan anymore.
I agree.
No. What industries are most interesting in Colombia for foreign investors? Well, I can't speak on behalf of all foreign investors. What I do know is I've seen a fair number of Colombian startups in the week that I've been here in Colombia, and they're definitely people thinking big and wanting to take on new and interesting ideas, and that's been really super cool. Foreign investors are unlikely to invest in startups in a foreign country. As Tyler mentioned to you, investors generally invest nearby. So you're very unlikely to get angel investors coming to Colombia from the United States, from Brazil, investing in Colombian startups. That would just be crazy. The concept of foreign investment is really, FDI is a concept that usually goes to like hard goods, like plants, infrastructure, buildings, things like that. It's really not for software companies. It's very unusual to get that kind of foreign direct investment. Well, it's a non-trivial problem. We've been talking about building the startup ecosystem in Colombia for the last couple of days, and what you need is things like Founder Institute, things like Ruta, things like Guaira in Bogota, that are elements of this concept. But at its core, you need government help, you need private investment, and you need years to be able to do it. It doesn't happen overnight, and it won't happen overnight. And the thing that I was saying earlier today, which I believe in very strongly, Colombia needs startup champions. You need one or two examples of great companies that have been very successful doing a startup from Colombia that other people can look at and say, hey, this is awesome. I want to be like these guys, or I think I can do better than these guys. This is an important part of the psychology of creating a startup ecosystem in a place where the culture generally doesn't encourage people to do tech startups at high risk. That I would say that if I were magically in charge of the Colombian startup ecosystem, I would be doing grassroots things like Ruta, like Founder Institute. I would be doing government things, and I would be looking for you know, one or two champions to really throw a lot of weight behind to try to create that kind of excellence.
Yeah, there's also needs to be some structure. So there needs to be a regular monthly event where all of the community comes together and shares their thoughts and ideas and their needs. And this is important in all of the tech markets in the US. In Los Angeles, we have this. New York has a famous one, the New York Tech Meetup. If you ever have a chance to go see this, it's really amazing. And it really inspired the Los Angeles Tech Meetup. And they do this in Boulder. All the tech communities in the US do this. And they're now doing it in London, and it's going to be starting in Stockholm and everywhere else. So it's this town hall meeting where everyone comes together under one roof every month, the same day, every month at the same time, and it's on a calendar. And when everyone comes, they say, I'm here. So on Facebook and on Twitter, the world knows, oh, there's an event here with 300 people there. I want to go next month, right? And it grows from there. But it needs some structure, and it needs somebody to write down everything that's happening at these meetups so that the world can see, oh, Medellin has a community now. Because until it's on the internet, it doesn't exist, right? First you need the meetup, and then it has to be online for everyone to see. And then they'll gravitate, they'll come here. Much like Apple stores when you go traveling, right, to somewhere where there's an Apple store. Technology people are very strange. If we walk by an Apple store, we don't need to buy anything, right? We're still going to walk into the Apple store. We know everything that's in the store. We don't want to buy it, but we go inside. It's just a habit. The same thing happens with technology communities. If Medellin has a technology community and they come to South America, they're going to come here just to see it because we're crazy like that. That's our world, you know? It's just like the Apple Store example. So hope that'd be great if something happened here. This is a really beautiful city, and I think it would attract people from all around who want to build their startups here if it's affordable to do it here, and there's the other resources like good mentors that are here, and I know there are some good mentors here, and it's cheap to do. Startups always look for a cheap place to build their startup, so that's another thing that I think it is quite affordable to do it here. So that's kind of an advantage that you have, actually. Another question: how important is traction for new startups? Paying customers versus just users? Well, that's a great question, actually. Was that your question? No, it's a great question. Traction is critically important, especially for startups outside of Silicon Valley. Most investors insist on seeing traction. Silicon Valley is kind of unique where they will let you continue on a project without a lot of traction, but the investors there are very unique. They have very big visions. But the rest of the world, a little more practical. They really depend on traction to get excited, to get more money, to continue your project. But in their question, they go to another level of detail where they say paying customers versus just users. Some businesses are based on paying customers, some are not. Facebook is not paying customers. So it just depends on what kind of business you have. If your business the business model is dependent on paying customers, then absolutely you need to track this. That's your number one metric. You need to track that very carefully. If your business is not, and it's just about eyeballs in it's advertising-based model, then you need to track those very carefully. But in each case, those are both traction, depending on what model you have. It's these days it's being replaced by. It used to be very hard to make software and apps. That's really no longer the case. The app, the very beginning of the app, the design of the app is more important than the business plan, because you really want to see what this person's going to do. I want a URL I can go to and play with it rather than read the business plan, because the business plan doesn't say so much anymore in the app world. In the app world, it's like, let me see the logo, let me see the design of the website, let me go there and use it once. That will say so much more than any business plan really can. Yeah, so there's a methodology called the lean startup methodology, which I think is, I'm curious to see if Gabe agrees with this. It's kind of controversial, but there's an interesting science to it. It's creating the very, very simplest way to test your idea. So everyone has an idea first, right? Then the question is this a valid idea? Is this a good idea? You need to test it before you do anything. Before you hire people, before you get angel money, before you do anything, test the idea. You might love the idea, but you don't know if it's a good idea until you test it, not on your friends and family. Your friends and family are going to love the idea. They always, especially your mom, she's going to love the idea no matter what. That doesn't matter. You need to test this idea with people who don't know you, live on the internet. So you create the simplest version of the website you possibly can, and it can be fake. It could be a fake website where it's just a form. And you say, please enter your credit card. And you test how many people enter their credit card. If they enter their credit card and they hit buy, it's a fake. It's not even a real buy button. They don't buy the product. You didn't build it. It's totally fake. But you're testing this. So you put an ad on Facebook that says, buy cheap underwear. I don't know, right? Half off. And do you see how many people click this? What percentage? What percent go to the website? And what percent enter the credit card? So that you really test this idea before. And that's very easy to do. You can build this in a week.
So Tyler's fictional startup, which let's just call it Booty Booty for the sake of argument. Tyler's fictional startup, he kind of gives an extreme example of testing this idea in the marketplace, which is to create a fake page and all that. The underlying concept in Agile is minimum viable product, do that as quickly as possible, iterate, ask questions. It works for almost every kind of startup. Games are a notable exception where it doesn't work because games have to be polished before they can be released to the market, fundamentally, but it is important to be able to do that. And I think for time horizon, when you're doing a financial projection, which most investors will expect you to have done some of that work, not because they think your numbers are going to be right, but because they want to see that you can think through the numbers accurately. Typically a 2-year projection is sufficient. Monthly 2-year projection, that's fine. And if you're thinking about if you're doing especially a consumer-facing internet startup and you believe your time horizon is longer than 6 months, then you're delusional because everything changes in 6 months to a year. And it can be, what you think the market scope is today will be radically different at this point in mid-2013.